Welcome back to Nick Lenz's Comic Corner Classic, Classic, Non-Classics. This is episode number 1730 and Doubleshot number 1624. I have two Marvel trades. First is kind of a end of a run per se, and the other one is basically the start of a really good series. Alright, first up we have Black Panther, Doomwar. This collects Black Panther Volume 5, Issues 7 through 12. The 6th issue miniseries, Doomwar. Claws the Panther, which is 4 issues. And Age of Heroes number 4. Now, I should point out, though, that Reginald Howland does do issue 7. That's the last issue he ever does with Black Panther. Mostly put this whole thing is done by John Mayberry. The artwork, the story arc known as from Black Panther Volume 5 is known as Power. All that is simply put the prelude to Doomwar. The artwork for that one was done by Will Conroy, who does pretty much almost that entire story except for issue 11, which is done by Ken Lashley, really good artist. The cover is by Paul Renton. Doomwar is done by Scott Eaton. He's the artist for that one. And believe it, Andy Lanning does the inking for this one. Yes, Andy Lanning. The cover is done by Jeremy Jr., Claus Johnson, and Dean White. I'll discuss more about that soon. Age of Heroes number 4, that's done by Sean Mall and the Claus Panther miniseries, which came right after Doomwar. That's done by Gantina Gugula with Pepe Laura as issues 3 and 4. Mostly put in the Power storyline. It's like, if you read the original issues, it says Prelude to Doomwar, because that's basically what the story arc was. Setting up Doomwar, basically Doom's invasion of Latveria. Which I'll get to more of that. So, in these issues, one of the biggest things that happen in these 6-issue storyline is... excuse me. We have T'Challa, the actual Black Panther, being revived. Yes, he gets out of his coma, he gets healed up, and of course you have Shara prepping for the invasion by Doctor Doom. It's not like it comes completely out of nowhere. The whole storyline builds up to that miniseries. And as for the miniseries itself, well, despite the fact John Romita Jr., like I said, does do the covers, Scott Eden does the interiors. And I should point something, here's a little fun fact about this storyline. You see, this storyline came out the same time as Siege. Yep. And basically involves the Black Panther fending off Doc Doom's invasion of his country with the help of the Fantastic Four and the X-Men. Yes, those two teams. Well, there's kind of a reason for that, because the Avengers are busy with Siege. Now, from a Fantastic Four perspective, this miniseries is kind of the reason why they don't play a role at all in Siege. And for the X-Men, it's kind of the same thing too. As for the placement of the storyline, well, it could be either before or after I would say it's probably just before Second Coming, because Second Coming, I would say, is like, from the outside world perspective, this is actually just after the events of Siege. That's the whole point of that story. By the way, that storyline is really good. I do recommend checking it out because it is a really damn good storyline. This one is too. It's basically having it's a big action sequence mostly for this miniseries, where you have the X-Men taking on the force of Doctor Doom. You have Black Panther, T'Challa, who's not in costume the whole miniseries. It's mostly his sister wearing the costume because she's currently the Black Panther. And then of course Black Panther activates T'Challa activates a device that deactivates all the vibranium in Latveria. Even though they win the battle, it's a hollow victory due to the fact they can't use any of their vibranium. Though it does get fixed later on, by the way. And then we lead into the Claws the Panther miniseries, which is basically the very next book for Shara, just after the events of that particular miniseries. Well, technically we have a storyline for Age of Heroes, which comes right after the events of that book. Excuse me. It's mostly just a story involving her. Just a quick little side story. It's the best way to describe this quick little story It's just a backdoor pouch to the Claws of the Panther miniseries, which is a miniseries focused on her. It's her trying to get some help to stop Claw, who has come back to life, and she wants to hire the Avengers. But the Avengers are busy, with the exception of Spider-Man. And you're probably wondering, why the heck is Spider-Man hanging out in Avengers Tower of all things? Yeah, this is of course Advents of Siege, where Norman Osborn was deposed, and the main team Avengers occupied the Avengers Tower for the next 5 years. They occupied it up until after the events of Secret Wars. This is during a period of time they were occupying Avengers Tower. If you're curious though, does this building still exist in the Marvel Universe? Yes, it does. Here's the thing what happened with it. Because of the fact that in Universe, Parker Industries has expanded so much, Stark International, Tony Stark's company, have faced some financial troubles. So in order to compensate some of the debt they have, Tony Stark sold the building. He did have another Stark Tower, but the main team Avengers at this point in time were not headquartered out of this tower anymore. They were headquartered out of an airport hangar for the All New All Different Avengers book, and then when it got relaunched as simply Avengers after Civil War II, they got moved to the Baxter Building, and they were there very briefly. Very briefly. And then, of course, the book was briefly taken over by the Hydra Avengers. And then, after the Avengers taken Empire, they couldn't headquarter Baxter anymore. So, they decided to move back to the mansion. First time since 2004, since this assembled, they did have the main team briefly occupy the mansion after Avengers Fear itself. But this was kind of another time they did this. But the thing is, the Unity Squad had taken over that building after it was briefly sold off. It was another thing was sold off, which I think was a mistake in the universe. If you're curious what happened at the mansion, it has currently been destroyed once again. This time because of events of No Surrender. Yep. But in the case of this, I at least got hands to the writer. He writes Spider-Man really interesting. It's a good team up between Spider-Man and Shara, and that's it for them. Of course, next time we see Black Panther, wouldn't be until Black Panther, well, basically Daredevil 512. That's next time we see Black Panther, because he's not really active very much this period of time. But this, of course, is really good. And I'm going to give this book a 9.5 out of 10. Yep. Final thoughts on Volume 5? Pretty good volume. It's not very long, though. It's pretty short. You're probably a little theory curious, though. Do I have a theory of why this book only lasts 12 issues? My personal theory of the reason why it lasts 12 issues, why was it canceled in order to replace it with a brief miniseries and another miniseries right afterwards? My guess is the book wasn't selling too well because when people buy Black Panther, they buy it for T'Challa, not for his sister. Yes, now you did have Rachel Holland did write the first half of this run before handing off to John Mayberry, who did pretty much finish up basically where he started, and basically all he did was set up a mini-series with his run. It's almost like the Deadliest of Species storyline probably didn't do well financially, but my guess is Marvel did want to probably end it maybe at issue 7, but I guess that John Mayberry was like, no, let's do 6 issues and did this mini-series, and it will close out Black Panther for a bit and do another mini-series afterwards. I gotta admit, doing the 4-issue mini-series Claws of the Panther, my only guess is the reason why I did that is because Marvel didn't have faith in Shara as a leading Black Panther. Though I should point out this wasn't the first time Marvel had replaced T'Challa as Black Panther. The last time was when Christopher Priest was in the book, and apparently when he came on the book, everything associated with Black Panther, the Wakanda, all of his characters, all dropped for the book. All because T'Challa gave up being Black Panther for a brief period of time. Though he did come back by the end of the run, and of course that character did appear sporadically even afterwards. Also with this book, I have pretty much reviewed everything for Black Panther, well, mostly published since 1998, well, since the relaunch on the Marvel Knights, because I've reviewed now the Christopher Priest run, Rachel Holland, this run, the run that came afterwards, which is Black Panther, Man Without Fear, / Most Named Man Alive, and the most recent run. I have not reviewed the current run yet because there's not a trade release for that yet. Right? First up is a really good series. We have X-Men Legends. Yes. Which, in my opinion, is probably, for the X books, probably the best, probably the one X-Men book that's is not associated with Krakatoa. Yeah, surprisingly, this is the only one not associated with, because all the rest of the X-Men books are associated with Krakatoa. This has nothing to do with that at all. This is mostly put just the classic 90s writers filling gaps in their stories. Now, there are 3 writers for these 6 issues in here, and just recently, they did release the final issue of this volume. Yes, volume. Because for some reason, Marvel decided to hit the restart button this book, despite the fact this book was probably very popular with a lot of people. Oh yeah, probably this was a pretty good sell for Marvel. Which begs the question, why did they hit the reset button for? I don't know. Now, there are 3 stories in here over the course of these 6 issues. First one is by Fabian Nicieza, an artwork by Brett Booth. This one mostly explores basically unveils the mystery of Adam X, because he was a character who they didn't explain his backstory very much. It was implied he might be Charles Xavier's nephew in this one. Yes. But in this story, no. He's not the nephew of Charles Xavier. He's Cyclops and Havoc's younger brother. Well, he's their half-brother. It explained the family tree in here that he's actually... They all three have the same mother, but not the same father, because Cornstar is not the father of Adam X. This issue, these 2 parts take place between issues 39 and 40 of X-Men Volume 2. And then you had 3 through 4, which is done by Louise Simonson, and artwork by Walter Simonson. Now, this 2-parter is an X-Factor. Well, it's not an X-Factor story. It's classic X-Factor. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's classic X-Factor with this one. Mm-hmm. Of course, yes, here's the family tree, which is the art style from the current Hickman run. Mm-hmm. Now, this 2-parter from issues 3 and 4, done by Louise Simonson, and of course, her husband Walt Simonson, takes place before the events of X-Factor 43, so presumably between 44 and 42 and 43. Which I'm glad the fact the editor does point this out, though. And the art style is clearly from Walt Simonson, because well, here, you're probably curious, though, about this ship. About this thing. This is Ship. That's what they call this thing. This was previously a base for Apocalypse. And if you're curious, though, where the heck this thing is currently in the Marvel Universe, it's no longer around. It was destroyed at the end of this era for X-Factor. Because, yeah, it takes place before issue 43. 43, well, this is probably after between issues 42 and 43. So, if you're curious, though, because technically in the first volume of X-Factor, you had 2 different X-Factor teams. The original one took it the first 70 issues, and of course the first 6 annuals. The replacement team, the Government Incarnation, is pretty much from issue 71 to 149. The popular X-Factor Investigations, that's all X-Factor Volume 3, and for 200 to about 254, I believe it was. Yes, that was all done by Peter David. And then you have All New X-Factor, and then the current X-Factor group, which is the kind of a PI group, but mostly put the explosive Krakatoa. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then we also have Iceman here wearing this metal belt. Okay, there is an explanation for that. That was due to something Loki did to him. Yes, Loki. Yeah, Loki had manipulated his powers, so his powers got out of control, so that is pretty much the reason why that he wears that belt. Mm-hmm. Yep. So, we do have we do have the baby Cable. Yes, baby Cable in the storyline. And this book does kind of lead into an explanation of why Cameron Hodge got a robotic body. That's mainly the gist of this 2-parter. Yeah, that's pretty much the explanation for this one. It does explain why in the world he's got one. Yep. Now, in the case of 5 through 6, they do bring up the fact about Apocalypse talking to Cameron Hodge about the Celestials. Yep, the Celestials. Now, in the case of the final 2 issues, this is between X Factor 75 and 76. Yeah, mostly put, this follows up what happened during the Peter David run, which, thank God they bring back Peter David for this run. Yep. And if you're curious, though, did Peter David do any more issues after this one? Because that was the thing with this book. They kept switching writers because, well, it's, like I said, it's mostly just writers filling in gaps in their stories. Mm-hmm. Yeah, who does the very next issue of X-Men Legends? Larry Hama. Yep. Yeah, basically this book goes with a series of writers. Mm-hmm. You have Larry Hama here for, was there 2 issues? 3. Yep, 3 issues. And then Famous Easy comes back for issue 10. And then Louis Simonson for 12. And then finally, the last issue that came up for this volume. It's the only issue done by Chris Claremont. Yep, the only one. And you're thinking, really? Yeah, it's only one. Mostly put for this, the X Factor one, the Government Carnation one. It's mostly put, if you're curious though, we have Valerie Cooper, who was their government liaison this period of time. So, they pretty much, they explain their confrontation with Doctor Doom, and Quicksilver's in the storyline. Yep, Quicksilver's here. And, yeah, it's mostly dealing with international incidents. And Valerie Cooper does point out, though, something interesting about how the X-Men treated the Marvel Universe. If the Avengers did this and did heroic stuff, they get medals. And mutants get chastised in the public. Which, yeah, that's definitely true. So Peter Dave is playing on the bigotry. And of course, this is all told by Valerie Cooper and Havoc via a Senate committee meeting. Yep, this is real. People do in fact do this. This is a real thing. Why the heck Peter David did this for? Because X-Men likes to play with politics sometimes. And there are certain people in the Marvel Universe who hate mutants. It's interesting, though, we have X Factor dealing with Doctor Doom in this 2-parter. Yes, Doctor Doom of all people. It's a really good 2-parter. Yep. And, of course, well, X Factor is absolved from the whole thing. Because you read the book, it's like, what, they don't get absolved by it? Nope, it was him mostly off screen. This kind of explains it. I got to admit, this actually was a good start for this run. And I like the fact Marvel did this. Now, technically, not the first time they ever did something like this. But I would give this book a 10 out of 10. It's really good. The last time we did it was actually the series Classic X-Men. Where that one kind of did something very similar to this one. Except that one basically was a reprint series that did have new stories as backups. And those pretty much in the way kind of did fill in some gaps. Mostly. It was described X-Vigilantes as what happened between the panels. That's basically what X-Vigilantes, basically, that trade paperback I reviewed once. They kind of explain that. Mm-hmm. And if you're curious, though, am I going to get Volume 2 for this? Yes. Yes, I am. Because this series is really good. It's mostly put, you can kind of say, this is for classic X-Men fans. Mm-hmm. If you're a fan of X Factor, either the corporate version done starred by Louis Simonson, or the PI version, this is definitely for you. And of course, there's X-Men here for him too. Yep. And if you're curious though, because of the fact we're drawing from the 90s for X-Men, you're probably curious though, does Chris Claremont ever do an issue for this series? Yes, he does. Issue 12. And you're thinking, really? He does? Yep, he does. Oddly enough, I do not know why in the world they decided to hit the restart button for X-Men Legends, but I guess they did for some reason. I don't know why. Though, the first issue of that was done by Roy Thomas. Yes. Who did the first 2 issues? Which should be interesting, though. Yep. So it's almost like first volume, the 90s. And now we're going to classic stuff here. Yep. And if you're curious, though, for the Gummy Carnation group, is there like first appearance of characters? Well, as far as I can tell, there wasn't any new characters that did pop up in here. Well, we did have a shock revelation. Well, we do have a couple characters. There's Jonath, who was mentioned back in issue of Captain Marvel from the 90s. Yes. Who dies in the very next issue. There's also the character Jenny, who is a minor character. And that was just the first issue, just 2 people. And of course, Jonah gets killed off in the very next issue. Yep, but there's no other characters made debut in the first 2 issues of the series. In issue 3 and 4, well, all they did was simply reveal Cameron Hodder was alive. But no first appearance for that one. Yeah. It is interesting, though, the fact that they actually did this. Yep. I mean, I think it's great, though. It does lead to the reason why they decided to lead with the Celestials is because it leads to a story known as Judgment War, which is a 8-part storyline that started with issue 43 and wrapped up with issue 50. And you might be asking, were these published in the 90s? Well, more like late 80s, early 90s. Yeah. Well, that's going to be pretty much it for this particular review. Stay tuned for next review, which is going to be Black Clover, okay? Next video.